My name is John Gaffney, and I am the Diocese Director for Evangelization and Catechesis for the Diocese of Des Moines, which is a rather large title, but to break it down, I have the greatest opportunity I think I could ever have in my life, because I get to travel around southwestern Iowa talking about faith. And I get to go to Mass every day. I get to have all these wonderful experiences with people in parishes, like here at St. Mary of Nazareth and many of the parishes in Des Moines, but also parishes in small rural areas that are just doing some amazing things. So tonight we're going to talk about a topic that's near and dear to my heart, which is uniting and building up our brothers. And the proposal I'm going to make is that we do that in small Christian communities. And before you get, in fact, I'm glad that we did the video there, because actually I had a video. I wasn't quite sure what level of levity this group likes. So I actually have something for you just coming up here in a brief moment with regards to that. But I want to kind of give you a little bit about my own history before we jump right into this particular topic. I am a convert to Catholicism. So I did not grow up Catholic. I grew up Methodist. I grew up on the east side of Des Moines. Anybody else from the east side of Des Moines? Lee Township against the road? Okay, I won't hold that against you. But I grew up about a half a block from the fairgrounds on Walnut. So I always considered the fairgrounds kind of my backyard. It was a great place for hide and go seek and baseball and all football and all sorts of things. I'd say when I was about 28, 29, I started realizing that some things were missing in my life. And it all came to a conclusion. I worked for a company called Kurt Van Orsdel, which was a major company out in West Des Moines, and I worked in training and development. And one day after a really tough meeting, where I just kind of bulldozed my way through what we were going to do, no matter what the obstacles were and the objections, I went back to my office and decided I needed to ease some of the anxiety and the anger that I had after that meeting. So I decided to eat lunch by myself. And as I was eating lunch, the person who was kind of second in charge of the department came in and asked me out to lunch. And I said, well, I'm too mad. This thing didn't go well. And she looked at me. Her name was Kathy. And she looked at me and she goes, you know, John, you've got a chip on your shoulder. And all of a sudden, I got very defensive once again, got very angry, and yelled at her and said, what do you mean? And I said, did somebody tell you about this meeting? Did somebody tell you all sorts of things? I just kind of went off. And she goes, no, John, you have a chip, a potato chip on your shoulder. Now, I don't know how many conversion stories you've heard with potato chips, but that does actually enter into my conversion, because all of a sudden, from that small Methodist background that I grew up in with this loving family, I realized just how far from my teen years to my late 20s I had kind of moved. And so that kind of started me searching for God in my life again. So kind of started back where I began on the east side in my little church, and just didn't feel right, and started with other Methodist church, and then went to other Protestant denominations. And finally, it just wasn't clicking. And finally, a good friend at Kurt Van Orsdel said, you know, have you ever thought about being Catholic? And of course, I think I turned white as a ghost. No, not Catholic. But she did the coolest thing. She invited me over to the Basilica of St. John, because Dr. Scott Hahn and his wife Kimberly were there. It was in the early 90s. And they were there doing a parish mission. And it was incredible. And as incredible as they were, including the fact that Dr. Scott Hahn prayed with me. He gave me his business card and said, call me at home if you have any questions as you're going through this. The other thing that blew me away was staying for Saturday evening Mass. That was, I knew this was where I was going. Didn't know the direction except towards Catholicism. And ever since then, I have not really known the direction except towards trying to give my life more and more over to Christ. Shortly after I converted to Catholicism, a few years after I kind of got some things under my belt, I thought maybe I should become a monk. I wasn't married at the time. I'd just been married 9 years this last June. And for those who know me, there's some St. Teresa's people here. And for those who know me, they probably wonder how I ever thought that I could get past this silent thing. Because I'm not necessarily the most silent person in the world. But it was one of the most wonderful experiences, even though it didn't necessarily work out. I told the prior, he said, well, you know, if you do discern that you might want to continue, you have to change your name. If you thought about what your name should be, you get 2 choices and then I get a choice. And I said, well, I think my name should be Innocent. That way, in case anything goes wrong, you can't blame me because I'm innocent. Okay, that was my bad joke for the day. But that was an incredible experience in my particular life. And then after that, I got back into youth ministry. Worked at St. John's Basilica for about 6 years. Worked at St. Teresa's, both in the school and in the parish for about 5 years, and then have been at the Pastoral Center for 4 years now. So it is an incredible journey, one that God has gifted me that I really didn't deserve, but it's just been a blessing, and tonight is a further blessing. Before the monastery, and I'm going to switch to this particular aspect, because the question I have for you is God calling you to step out of the boat and lead others to Him, especially your brothers. That's kind of our topic tonight. And I'm going to do some proposing, I'm going to tell some stories, and give you some opportunities to think about how this might work in your particular life and with your friends and the men that are closest to you. I was fortunate at the Basilica of St. John. That's where I went through RCIA, and that's where I came into the church. That shortly after I joined, I connected with this group of other guys, and all of us like to play tennis. And so, quite out of, no one had put anything together, we decided that we were going to try once a month to form some kind of opportunity to do some faith sharing. And so to take what we were already doing in our schedules, because we're all very busy, at that point a lot of us were getting married, having babies, with our wives having babies, different things like that. And so life was hectic, trying to establish a career. So we thought, well, we already are doing this tennis thing, and that's pretty good. Maybe once a month we can add something to it to bring our Catholic faith into it. And that's kind of where that got started. And that was in 1995. And we started with 6 guys. We're about 8 or 9 guys now. Some have moved away and dropped off, and some have added in. It has been the most amazing experience of my life. And it just started in a very natural, very easy way of people who didn't really, that we weren't theologians. I didn't have my master's in ministry, but I knew that these guys and I could help each other focus on Christ's face a little closer. And that's what I'm going to propose tonight for you with regards to this particular evening. So, with that, I want you to look at this particular image, because I'm going to read something from the Gospel of Matthew. And this particular story is about the disciples in the boat. So, and the walking on the water. Now, the 2 verses that I'm really going to emphasize are verse 28 and 29. But I'm going to read the whole story to you, because it's really important, because again, if you look at the title, it's uniting and building up your brothers. So if you look at this boat, how do each of us help our brothers get into the boat. So that's one step. And then the other step is, how do we build each other up to do what Peter did, and that is to walk on the water. So to do that, I want to kind of read to you this particular gospel story. Then he made the disciples get into the boat and proceed him to the other side while he dismissed the crowds. After doing so, he went up on the mountain, he himself, to pray. When it was evening, he was there alone. Meanwhile, the boat, already a few miles offshore, was being tossed around by the waves, for the wind was against it. During the fourth watch of the night, he came toward them, walking on the sea. When the disciples saw him walking on the sea, they were terrified. "It is a ghost," they said, and they cried out in fear. At once, Jesus spoke to them. "Take courage. It is I. Do not be afraid." Peter said to him in reply, "Lord, if it is you, command me to come to you on the water." He said, "Come, Peter, get out of the boat and begin to walk on the water toward Jesus." But when he saw how strong the wind and sea became, he was frightened, and he began to sink. He cried out, "Lord, save me." Immediately Jesus stretched out his hand and caught him and said to him, "O ye of little faith, why did you doubt?" After they got back into the boat, the wind died down. Those who were in the boat did him homage, saying, "Truly, you are the Son of God." So if we look at this image, we see storms. And, don't we all have storms in our life? Some are bigger than others. Some are things that we expected, maybe the outcome of some of the decisions we've made. Others come to us quite quickly. But then there's the boat. And again, tonight, when we talk about small Christian communities, what I want to share with you is that whereas Jesus said, "Get into the boat," how are you going to help your brothers get into the boat? And then how are you going to, together, hand in hand, lead them to the face of Jesus? So that you have enough courage, and they have enough courage, to get out of the boat and to walk to Jesus, no matter what the storm is doing. So with that, I'm going to provide a little levity. So we've got our task ahead of us. Now, a little levity. This is called shallow small communities.
Are you tired of small groups always getting into your business, trying to get you to share your feelings, discuss your past, confess your sins? Are you just looking for a place to kick it, network, maybe get some free grub? Me too. That's why I created what I believe to be the world's first openly shallow small group. You're not here to deal with messy stuff like feelings and emotions. You got problems? You deal with them. You're an adult. Life ain't easy. So stop the pity party. We all have our issues. We don't really want to do life together. Frankly, at Shallow Small Group, we try not to do much of anything at all. You'll never hear us use the term, unpack that thought. We're sure it's packed away for a really good reason. You'll never hear us use the term accountability unless you're talking about someone who deals with numbers. Hey dude, thanks for doing my taxes. You have great accountability. And spiritual growth. Who wants growth? I had a growth removed last week. It wasn't pleasant. There's no pressure here to remember each other's name.
Oh, buddy. Oh, hey man, how's it going? Oh, dude.
We know you have a name, and that's the important thing. Group discussion? You got tickets to the big game? Sweet. Let's spend some time on that. Oh, you and your wife are struggling financially? There's tension in the relationship? That's not really the vibe we're going for. We avoid conflict like the plague.
Wants cake!
And there will never, ever be an awkward silence. That's our guarantee to you. We hate bad theology as much as the next guy, and we know the surest way to prevent bad theology is to avoid theology altogether.
And outreach? This is the only outreach you'll ever have to do.
Some people say we're superficial, but hey, the word super's and superficial. I mean, who doesn't want to be super? Shallow, small group, because when things get too deep, people drown. Don't you join us?
You know, whenever we laugh, there's a lot of truth to that. And I don't know about you. How many have been on a Christ Renews His Parish? Raise your hand. Okay. We saw how many went on the Iowa Men's Conference. How many went to Christ Our Life? Okay, good. Good. How many have been a part of some kind of a Advent or Lent or Mission Week at your parish? Good. How many of you are knights? Good. Excellent. Well, the reason that I like that video a lot, I'm going to actually take this off. It's easier for me to do this. The reason I like that video a lot is because with good humor, there's always some truth. And I think the biggest, I use that video because what it does is it helps me anyway, be able to slay some of the elephants in the room. And the big one is, for men, is intimacy. But what I want to do first, as I progress the night, is I want to do three things. First of all, I want to show you some statistics of what happens when we don't engage with each other, men to men. And then I want to share with you some principles on how you can do it in very small ways that are organic into your life. And then how to get started. And then we'll open it up for any questions that you might have after that. But if you look up here, I want you to look at some of these statistics. Now, these statistics are not just for Catholics. So we're not the only ones in the boat when it comes to the state of the church here in the United States. So the Catholics are right up there, but this isn't the case. But if you look at that, you can see the percentage of female versus male. And the gender gap actually increases up until about those in the early to mid-20s. It's actually starting to come down a little bit with younger people. But look at, if you look at some of these other aspects, churches overseas report gender gaps of up to 9 women for every adult man in attendance. So those who might have gone to church in Europe or anything, you might have seen a ton of women and hardly any men. And that's our trajectory. That's kind of the direction we're moving. I like to use the word trajectory because it talks about a force that's been going. So we're up to about 61%, or 6 out of 10. We could be moving to 9 out of 10. And part of that is basically based upon how are we reaching out with the new evangelization, but how are we doing it in a very way that is intimate within the lives of each other, that call each other to accountability. And fewer than 10% of U.S. churches are able to establish or maintain a vibrant men's ministry. So kudos to Man Up and to the Iowa Men's Conference and to so many things that are happening in our local church that really are being able to be sustained. Now the question is, how do we increase it? How do we keep getting this movement out here? Now there are some other good statistics, I'll let you take a look at these, of why this is good for you. So churchgoers are more likely to be married and express a higher level of satisfaction with their life. Church involvement moves people out of poverty. Religious participation leads men to become more engaged as husbands and fathers. And for me, someone who, as Tim had talked about, I'm the head of the Department of Evangelization and Catechesis, and we handle every aspect of formation, from the youngest people to our most senior of citizens. But we really do see a crisis when it comes to teens, and especially teen males. In that crisis, we see that there is a huge percentage of young people who, and I've posted it up here, it might have been in the previous one, but if especially young teens, teen males are going to leave the church, it's going to happen between their teen years and their early 20s. And most of the time, for males, it's because they have not seen their father necessarily engaged in the faith that much. And so there are some really good reasons to consider this proposal of possibly in this next year starting a small intentional community yourself of some of your friends. So with that, let me throw some things at you. First of all, there are some 5 principles for small Christian communities. One of the things that I think is really important is to try and find your friends that you're doing things with already. I think that's a great way. We have so many parish programs, and that's wonderful, and this is a great program here. But there are people that you associate with every single day, just like my friends who are tennis players. And none of us play tennis that much anymore, but we still continue this group. They still continue to come up to the hospital and pray over me and to support me as a brother. And this has just been incredibly important. So the intimacy that can be found in small groups will transcend into the parish, but you don't necessarily need to have a parish structure. So if you've got some good friends, it might be some people you know at work, or it could be some guys that you go and play softball with. It could be some people that you go work out with, some men you work out with. It could be neighbors that are all Catholic. Start there and start small. Remember that Jesus said, wherever 2 or 3 are gathered, there I am in your midst. In fact, I think 5, 6, 7 is a good number. Think about St. Paul. St. Paul, as he was going and doing his journeys, he would start a church, get it going, and then he would leave them, and then he'd come back for support. And this is what I guess I'm proposing for each of us, is to consider doing the same thing. Are there 2 or 3 or 4 other people that you know that you can start something very easy, and I'll show you very easy ways to do this, and meet regularly to support each other, to invite them into the boat for a deeper relationship with Christ, and then have the courage to be able to step out into those rough waters. Now, the first thing that's important in a small group, and you did it here, is prayer. What we used to do before our tennis matches, we'd start about an hour ahead before our matches were to begin. And so we would start with prayer. So sometimes it was the Rosary, sometimes it was the Chaplet of Divine Mercy, sometimes we were running late, and so we just might sing a song, or somebody might pray a scripture passage for us. But we began with prayer. We put ourselves in the presence of Christ, and very intentional way. So you begin and end with prayer, just as you do here with these particular sessions. The next thing is education. And we even managed to do this in front of a tennis game. There are lots of cool ways that you can do these things. So some of them are more traditional, like, for example, Bible studies. Over at St. Teresa's, there's a Bible study that's very well known. Bob Downey has got it. Joe, are you still part of that group?
With the birth of my child, I'm more of a once a month than I am every Wednesday. But I keep telling him to come. Yeah, I know. And you know what? I got another one coming. It's tough.
So there are some Bible studies, but you can do Bible studies that are incredibly good. So you don't have to be a theologian. So many times people don't open up the Bible, and I was one of them, even though I was Protestant. I was one of them. I didn't open up the Bible because I felt I had to be able to say something about the Scripture that sounded intelligent. And what I'm proposing as you're looking at these Bible studies is to consider where is that passage taking you. So for example, again, the imagery, and Google is a great helper, I think, in this. Because what you can do, let's say that you're pulling out this walking on the water scripture passage, and that's what you're going to study this particular week. You can Google Matthew 14, 28, 29, and it'll give you all these different kind of cool pictures. And so you can, without getting too terribly deep, but going deep enough so that you're challenging your brothers, you can say, well, what are those storm clouds in your life? And as you're getting to know each other, and not quite to that trust level of saying, well, this is my issue, or my wife and I are having this problem, or these things are happening. What we want to do is say, on a scale of 1 to 10, with 10 being the worst, and maybe a 1 being the best day ever, where are you at in those storm clouds? How's life going? And so you can, in a very easy way, go ahead and figure out that particular Bible passage. And so you start sharing that particular faith. There's some other things that I have put up here too. Book club. One of my favorite things, and this was actually recommended by Monsignor Chido. We were at the Basilica of St. John, and he was the pastor at the time. And I love this. What he said is, have you thought about doing a movie night? Renting it or going to see some movies, and then talking about it after that. Or there's some really great television shows. So we would rent, and not all of them were necessarily religious movies. Like, for example, one of them that he had suggested really early on was Forrest Gump. And of course, there were some really difficult parts in Forrest Gump, but it made us talk about the challenges that we have as men and what we saw as virtue in that movie and what we saw as vice, and to really talk about it in the context of our life. It was a great way of doing it, and it was a great opportunity. Of course, there's the Iowa Men's Conference, parish missions, Advent, and local missions, but there needs to be an education piece. So prayer, education, shared leadership. One of the things we learned early on, and as I've gone around the country, or around the diocese, that I've seen, is when people will share the leadership, it makes it so much easier. So maybe one year, one person or two people go ahead and do the leadership. And basically it's like, well, what kind of books should we study? Or should we do a movie night? Or should we do some other things? Share that particular leadership, because the burden of trying to figure something out time and time again can really wear on somebody. So share that leadership. Figure out what format works best for you. And then last but not least, challenge each other to go a bit deeper. To use the information to figure out how to put this in action in your life. So again, going back to those storm clouds, if your group's been going on, of course I was definitely dealing with a medical issue, but how was I going to use that medical issue to grow closer to Christ? And my brothers came up with some great challenges for me that I very, very much appreciated. Last but not least is healing. It's not the place for open confession. So as we saw in the video, there is a place for confession. As you get closer, or if you have relationships one-on-one with people, certainly open up and do confessions about what you're going through and what life is going at. But this is not necessarily the place to lay it bare every single particular time. But you do want to support each other by challenging your brothers and myself to go to the sacrament of confession, to have do the daily examen, and possibly do adoration of the Blessed Sacrament as a possibility for your particular group. And again, if it is appropriate and the trust is already built, go ahead and share some of the difficulties. I'm certainly not going to have anybody raise their hands, but my brother has been an addict most of his life. And many times I have accompanied him to AA meetings. And I tell you, those are some of the most amazing opportunities of brother-to-brother love that I have ever seen. Challenging, to share with each other, to love each other, to know that they belong, that they're accepted. All of those things are a very important part of healing. And so, so to a certain extent, how can we match that in our lives? Because all of us need healing. Every single one of us needs something that God's love needs to help us with. So that healing aspect. And then how do you put it into action? And I put some categories up there. One of the things I think that's incredibly important that I'm going to pull out is that witnessing to your wife and family. So one of the fruits of small intentional communities for men is how it affects your wife, your if you're not married, that somebody special in your life, or your children. So how comfortable are you to pray with your wife? How comfortable are you to pray with your children? And to keep that going no matter what age they are. There was that country song a long time ago by Rodney Atkins, I think, and he talked about where they see you be able to witness to that. And one of the things was him cussing, then the other part of it was that he had prayed that night and then he saw his son doing the same thing. And I think the song was I'll Be Watching You, but how do you put it into action? And then the thing of it is, when you do that, then bring that to the next session. So is that a weekly session? Is that every other week? Is it monthly? Talk about what you were going to put into action for that particular month, and then talk about it the next month. Again, you can go generalities, or you can go into more detail depending upon the guys that you have put together. And last but not least, how do you put the group together? And so, again, my recommendation, number one, start small. 2 or 3. When I work in youth ministry, what I try and do is put together a core team. And the core team I never like to have much bigger than 6 or 7 people. But consider 2 or 3 people. Is there one person that you could commit to once a month? So as you leave here tonight, is there one person that you could commit to once a month to meet, to have some conversations about your faith? And to maybe do one of these ideas. And how would you necessarily do that? And commit to daily prayer as you're doing that. Keep the group small. Decide what the meeting format is and the time. Meet with your pastor. This is a very important one. Your pastor has incredible knowledge and information for you. So meet with the pastor. And they can be very funny. And like I said, like Monsignor Chido was incredible. I used to we had Father Larry Hoffman do some things with us, Monsignor Vignano. So they would give us some ideas that were incredible. Begin and constantly assess through your first year how things are going and what needs to be different. And if other men ask you about the group, help launch a separate group. So you take the seeds of that particular group and do exactly what St. Paul did, and you move it out. And by doing that, these small Christian communities, and this is how Hope Lutheran Church does it. If you ever wonder how Hope Lutheran Church is as big as it is, it's because they invest so much time in small Christian communities. So my proposal for you tonight is to seriously consider thinking about 1 or 2 other people that you might want to invite this year to seriously look at it once a month, once every other week. How can you put your faith in action by sharing with uniting and building up your brothers? Thank you.